Welcome back. Today's story is all about betrayal, deception, and revenge served cold, just when they think they've won. The tables turn. Stay tuned. This one's unforgettable. The towering skyline of downtown Chicago shimmered in the evening light as Olivia Carter stepped into the conference hall. Her confidence radiating through the room. As a high-profile corporate lawyer, she had spent years building a reputation as one of the best in the industry, negotiating multi-million-dollar deals and outmaneuvering seasoned executives. Yet, despite her professional success, there was a lingering unease in her personal life, one that she had pushed aside for months. Her husband, Daniel Carter, a real estate investor, had grown distant, his once charming attentiveness replaced by hurried phone calls and vague excuses about business trips. Olivia had always assumed it was just the ebb and flow of marriage. But deep down, she knew something was off. As she settled into her seat for the keynote presentation, her phone buzzed against the polished wood of the conference table. Glancing down, she saw Daniel's name flashing across the screen. A small sigh escaped her lips. He rarely called her during business hours anymore, much less when he knew she was attending an important legal summit. Expecting a quick check-in, perhaps a half-hearted, "How's the event?" or "When will you be home?" she stepped out into the quiet hallway, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Hey, Daniel," she answered, keeping her voice even. On the other end, there was no warmth, no pretense of pleasantries. Instead, Daniel's voice was cold, clipped, and disturbingly smug. "I'm divorcing you," he said bluntly, "and I've already sold the penthouse." For a moment, Olivia froze. The words didn't register immediately, as if her brain refused to process the absurdity of what she had just heard. Sold the penthouse? Their luxurious high-rise apartment, the one they had hand-picked after years of hard work, was gone? What? She asked, her lawyer instincts kicking in, her voice deceptively calm. Daniel chuckled, a dry, arrogant laugh that sent a shiver of rage through her. "Yeah, the paperwork's done. The money's already in play. You'll need to figure out where you're living next." A slow, simmering fury spread through Olivia's chest, but she swallowed it down. Daniel was expecting shock, devastation, maybe even begging, but she wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. "Interesting," she said smoothly, her tone betraying nothing. "And tell me, Daniel, exactly how did you manage to sell a property you don't own?" Silence, just the faintest hitch in his breath. That's when Olivia knew he had made a very, very big mistake. Olivia could hear the arrogance dripping from Daniel's voice. But beneath it, there was something else, hesitation. He hadn't expected her to challenge him so quickly, let alone question the legitimacy of the sale. That single pause told her everything she needed to know. He thought he had the upper hand, that he had outmaneuvered her. But what he didn't realize was that he had made a critical mistake. Still, she wasn't about to tip her hand just yet. She forced herself to remain composed, gripping the phone tighter as she paced the length of the conference hallway. "What do you mean?" Daniel scoffed after a moment, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "I signed the deal, Olivia. It's done. I needed the money. And honestly, Stephanie and I," he paused, as if testing how the name would land. "We need something new, something fresh. She deserves better than that penthouse anyway." Olivia's stomach churned at the mention of Stephanie. There it was, the confirmation of what she had suspected for months. The late nights, the sudden work trips, the dismissiveness whenever she asked about their finances. It had all led to this moment. Daniel had not only betrayed her, but he had done so with an air of entitlement, as if she were the intruder in his new. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Stephanie," she repeated, letting the name hang in the air. "Right. Well, I hope she enjoys her time with you, Daniel, because I have a feeling it's going to be short-lived." A chuckle from his end. "You can be as bitter as you want. But the fact is, Olivia, I won. I get to walk away. Clean slate. While you," he let out an exaggerated sigh. "Well, you'll have to start over. But hey, you're tough, right?" The audacity. Olivia clenched her jaw, her fingers digging into her palm. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully bulldozed through her life, leaving her scrambling while he ran off into the sunset with Stephanie. But what he didn't know, what he hadn't even bothered to check, was that he had never legally owned the penthouse. Months ago, during a refinancing process, Olivia had insisted on transferring the deed solely into her name. Daniel, in his typical fashion, had skimmed the paperwork and signed without question, too eager to enjoy the lower interest rates to even bother understanding the details. His carelessness would be his undoing. For a brief moment, Olivia almost laughed. He was celebrating a victory that didn't exist. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "Enjoy this moment. Really, soak it in. Because in about 24 hours, you're going to realize that you've made the biggest mistake of your life." Another pause. "What the hell does that mean?" he snapped. "You'll find out soon enough." She ended the call before he could say another word. Her heart pounding, not from fear, but from resolve. He thought he had destroyed her life. He had no idea he had just set himself up for complete humiliation. Olivia lowered her phone, her pulse still hammering, but her mind was already racing ahead. Daniel had no idea that he had just sealed his own fate. If there was one thing she had learned from years of practicing law, it was that the devil was always in the details Daniel never cared enough to read. He had spent their entire marriage assuming he was the smartest person in the room, dismissing her concerns, brushing off conversations about finances as if she were too naive to understand. But what he saw as blind trust had actually been preparation. And now, it was time to let him crash into the very trap he had set for her. Stepping back into the conference hall, Olivia spotted Marcus, her best friend and the firm's most ruthless litigator, leaning casually against the bar, sipping an old-fashioned. He raised an eyebrow as she approached, sensing the shift in her energy. "Bad news?" he asked. "Not for me," she said smoothly, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Daniel just called. He thinks he sold my penthouse." Marcus nearly choked on his drink, setting his glass down with an amused smirk. "Oh, that's interesting, considering it's your penthouse." Olivia nodded, a slow, knowing smile creeping onto her face. "Yep. He never bothered to check the paperwork when we refinanced earlier this year. I had the deed transferred to my name exclusively." She leaned back, exhaling as the weight of the conversation lifted. "Which means he just committed fraud." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's a whole new level of stupid." He shook his head in disbelief. "He really thought he could sell it without your signature?" Olivia tapped her fingers against the marble countertop, her lawyer instincts kicking into high gear. "Not only that, but he's already spent the money." The realization sent a thrill of satisfaction through her. Daniel had been so confident, so sure that he had outmaneuvered her, that he had jumped headfirst into spending cash that legally wasn't even his. Marcus grinned, swirling the ice in his glass. "So, what's the plan? Call the buyer? Make Daniel sweat?" "Both," Olivia said, pulling out her phone. She dialed the number of the real estate firm handling the sale, her voice cool and professional as she introduced herself. Within moments, the agent on the other end went from polite confusion to outright panic as Olivia explained that Daniel had no legal authority to sign off on the sale. The property still legally belonged to her, making the entire transaction void. By the time she hung up, Olivia could already envision Daniel's impending meltdown. The buyer would be furious, demanding their deposit back, and Daniel, who had likely already funneled that money into his new life with Stephanie, would have no way to pay them back. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "This is going to be spectacular." Olivia picked up her glass and clinked it against his. "Oh, it's about to be legendary." For months, Daniel had treated her like she was blind to his lies, too weak to challenge him. But now, the tables had turned, and as the reality of his mistake began to close in around him, Olivia could only sit back and watch. The game had just begun. Olivia wasted no time. The moment she left the conference, she booked the first available flight home. Daniel thought he had taken everything from her, her home, her dignity, her future, but he was about to learn the hard way that he had never been in control. As the plane soared through the night sky, she leaned back against the seat, her mind methodically constructing her strategy. Step 1. Invalidate the fraudulent sale. Step 2. Expose Daniel's deception. Step 3. Make sure he walked away with nothing. By the time she landed in Chicago, Marcus had already set things in motion. A formal letter had been drafted and sent to both Daniel and the real estate firm handling the sale, outlining the illegality of the transaction and the consequences of fraud. The buyer, furious upon discovering that they had been deceived, immediately demanded a refund, money Daniel no longer had. The penthouse sale was officially void, and Daniel was now facing potential legal action from an enraged buyer who had just realized he had been swindled. As Olivia walked into the penthouse that night, a wave of familiarity and relief washed over her. It still smelled like home, the faint trace of her favorite vanilla and cedarwood candles lingering in the air, but something about it felt different now. It no longer felt like a shared space. It was hers. The walls, the high-end furniture, the expansive view of the city, it was all her hard work. Her success, her name on the deed. And yet, Daniel had tried to take it away as if she were nothing more than an afterthought. Well, not anymore. The next morning, Daniel's world started to crumble. His first mistake was underestimating just how quickly Olivia would react. His second mistake was assuming that she would go down without a fight. Her phone rang just as she was sipping her coffee. "What the hell have you done?" Daniel's voice was sharp, but beneath the bravado, there was a tinge of panic. Olivia smirked, stirring her coffee leisurely. "Oh, Daniel," she said, voice dripping with feigned innocence. "I'm just taking care of some legal matters. You know, since you apparently don't read the fine print. You're ruining everything," he exploded. "I already signed the sale agreement. The money's already being moved. You can't just..." "Oh, I can," she interrupted smoothly, "because, unlike you, I actually own this place. You signed a fraudulent sale agreement. Daniel, that means the deal is void. And let's not forget the part where you accepted money for something that wasn't yours to sell." She let the words sink in, savoring the silence that followed. "Olivia, you don't want to do this," he said, his tone shifting to a desperate plea. "We don't have to go to war over this." She laughed. "Oh, but we do. Because you didn't just try to steal from me, you tried to erase me from my own life. And now, you get to deal with the consequences." By midday, Daniel's problems had only grown worse. The buyer's lawyer had sent a demand letter, threatening to sue for fraud if their money wasn't returned immediately. The real estate firm was furious, pulling back their involvement to avoid legal complications. And Olivia? She was just getting started. With Marcus's help, she began drafting the divorce papers. There would be no negotiations, no settlements in Daniel's favor, no second chances. He had walked away first, and she would make sure the door stayed firmly shut behind him. As she sat in her penthouse that evening, a glass of wine in hand, she felt something she hadn't in months. Control. Daniel had thought he had won, but the game wasn't his to play anymore. The storm hit that evening. Daniel came barreling into the penthouse, his face red with fury, gripping a crumpled legal notice in his hand. Olivia had been expecting him. She had even prepared a glass of wine. Savoring the satisfaction of knowing this was the moment he realized he had lost. "What the hell is this?" he roared, slamming the papers onto the kitchen counter. "You're telling me I can't sell the penthouse? That I committed fraud?" Olivia calmly set her wine down, tilting her head as if considering the question. "Oh, Daniel," she said, voice laced with mock sympathy. "Did you not read the paperwork? Because if you had, you'd know that this place has been solely in my name for months." Daniel's face twisted in confusion, then panic. He had signed those refinancing documents without even skimming them, just like he always did, trusting that he could smooth talk his way through anything. That's not possible," he stammered, flipping through the pages as if the words would somehow change before his eyes. "Oh, but it is," Olivia continued, stepping forward. "You see, when we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name alone. You signed the papers without question, too eager to lock in a lower interest rate to bother with the fine print." Classic you. Stephanie, Daniel's girlfriend, stood beside him, arms crossed, her expression shifting from smug confidence to suspicion. "Wait a second," she snapped. "You told me you owned this place. You said you already sold it and had the money." Daniel flinched, trying to wave her off. "Stephanie, not now." But Olivia wasn't about to let him slither away. "Oh no, Stephanie," She interjected. This is exactly the time. Because Daniel didn't sell anything. He tried to sell something that wasn't his. Took money he had no right to. And now, he's looking at a fraud lawsuit. Stephanie took a step back. Her face hardening as the realization hit her. The lavish future Daniel had promised her? Built on a lie. You son of a, she hissed. Grabbing her purse. You told me you had everything under control. That you had money. Daniel reached for her. Desperate. Babe, I can fix this. Just give me time. Stephanie yanked her arm away. Fix it? She scoffed. You're broke. And now you're about to get sued? I am not sticking around for that. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Daniel standing there, humiliated. Olivia leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a satisfied smirk. Well, that didn't go as planned. Did it? Daniel turned to her, eyes filled with rage and desperation. You're really going to do this to me? Olivia took a slow, deliberate step closer. No, Daniel, you did this to yourself. You tried to rip my life apart. Take my home. Leave me with nothing, but you failed. Now, you're the one with nothing. She picked up a folder from the table and tossed it onto the counter. These are the divorce papers. Sign them, and this will all be over. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening as he stared at the documents. He had lost, completely, utterly, and publicly, and Olivia had never felt stronger. The moment Daniel's signature hit the divorce papers, Olivia felt an overwhelming sense of relief. There was no grand explosion, no dramatic last-minute plea for reconciliation, just a hollow acceptance from a man who had finally realized he had lost everything. He packed his things in silence, avoiding her gaze as he hauled his suitcases toward the door. When he paused, as if searching for something to say, Olivia simply held the door open. Goodbye, Daniel, she said, her voice steady, unwavering. With one last look at the penthouse, the home he had tried to steal, he walked out. And for the first time in years, Olivia truly felt free. The silence in the penthouse that evening was different. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of a relationship crumbling in the background, nor the oppressive weight of betrayal. It was peace. She took a deep breath, stepping into the living room, where all traces of Daniel's presence were slowly disappearing. His oversized leather chair, his sports memorabilia cluttering the walls, the heavy furniture he had insisted on keeping, all gone. The space felt lighter, as if she had exhaled all the toxicity that had been suffocating her for years. That weekend, Marcus and her best friend, Mia, came over with takeout and a bottle of champagne. To fresh starts, Marcus said, raising his glass. To never letting a man underestimate you again, Mia added with a smirk. Olivia clinked her glass against theirs, a slow smile spreading across her lips. To finally putting myself first. Over the next few weeks, she transformed the penthouse into something entirely her own. She repainted the walls, moved her favorite artwork into the main living space, and replaced the cold, impersonal decor Daniel had chosen with pieces that actually made her feel at home. The penthouse was no longer a reminder of her failed marriage, it was a reflection of her strength, independence, and resilience. Daniel tried to reach out a few times, half-hearted apologies, empty justifications, even a desperate attempt to make her feel guilty for ruining him. She ignored them all. He wasn't her problem anymore. A month later, Olivia finalized the divorce and celebrated with dinner at a rooftop bar, overlooking the city she had fought so hard to reclaim as her own. As the cool night breeze brushed against her skin, she realized something profound. Daniel's betrayal wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one she would write on her own terms. She took a deep breath, staring at the twinkling skyline. She had won, not just the legal battle, not just her home, but her freedom. And for the first time in years, she felt excited about what came next. Smiling to herself, she raised her glass to the future, one where she was finally in control. The story of Olivia teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, resilience, and the importance of protecting what you've built. It highlights how trusting the wrong person can be costly, but preparation and intelligence can turn betrayal into victory. Olivia's journey proves that strength isn't just about fighting back, it's about knowing your worth and refusing to be treated as disposable. She didn't just reclaim her home, she reclaimed her independence, confidence, and future. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't defeating Daniel, it was realizing that she was always capable of standing on her own. Stronger than ever.